Join me while I give my opinions on three key rules or regulations I believe should be introduced into the sport. The first thing I want to talk about is the money shift in football. Now, back in the day, football clubs, it was a sport, it was a competition. There was no real issue about money. There wasn't a whole load of money involved. Owners and fans were pretty much on the same wavelength, wanted the club to do well and perform well on the pitch. That was the only single ideology around, or any goal or ambition for a club to do well on the pitch. Nowadays, and in recent years, there's been a large influx of money, and the ideology's changed where clubs are mainly focused on just money and to run their clubs like a business, and less about what happens on the pitch, and less focus goes towards player development and more towards the business side and marketing the club and merchandising and new TV deals and new sponsorship deals, etc. Now, this isn't shown better than any club other than Arsenal, where their primary goal is to get top four and it's essentially run as a business top to bottom. And performances on the pitch aren't given any real priority to do that. As long as it's running as a business, as long as it's a good business model, as long as it's making profit consistently, it's fine. This thinking or ideology is also now taken clubs like Leicester City, who won the Premier League last season. They've got a taste of that now, taste of that success, taste of that high placed Premier League money, and they've sacked manager Claudio Ranieri, who, for what he did, should have essentially got a lifetime at the club. Now, ask this question, right? Back in the day, maybe 20, 30 years ago, after doing what he did with a club like Leicester City back then, would he have got sacked? And there's no way he would. He would probably literally been given the job for a lifetime at that point. But he was sacked this season. Now, a lot of people will say, well, he was sacked to stay in the Premier League because obviously you don't want to get relegated from the Premier League, right? Yeah, sure he was, but for what reason? Was he sacked to stay in the Premier League because Leicester want to be a Premier League club and Premier League is a great competition. We want to be in this competition. We want to be a good club and do well and we're ambitious. Or was he sacked to avoid the high cost of not being in the Premier League, to avoid losing out on all that Premier League money? That's the real reason he got sacked. Yeah, sure, the reason on the face of it is to be in the Premier League because they were threatened by relegation. But in reality, behind the scenes, the actual reason is again money and the influence of the Premier League, where Premier League is literally the richest league in the world. This shift in mentality throughout the league, it's not just about the top clubs, it's throughout the league, it's throughout the Premier League, it's actually worldwide in all of football, except in the Premier League it's highlighted the most because it's the richest league and the majority of the money is in the Premier League now. This whole thinking's taken clubs from trying to be competitive and trying to treat it as a sport and competition to like a financial stock market, and you're trying to be in the league, trying to be in the top of the table just to kind of survive and get more money. And clubs in the Championship, which is the second division of the Premier League, for those of you who are outside England or don't know, their goal for promotion is basically to first get the rewards of the Premier League, and then secondly the promotion money they get, which is supposedly the biggest prize in football. Now, financial fair play was introduced to kind of remove this issue, but all it really did was ensure larger clubs stay large and smaller clubs stay small unless they perform miracles. For example, Leicester did to last season, because it only allowed clubs to spend what they make and reduce the club's debt and losses. But what that did was ensure the larger clubs that make more money, have a larger turnover, can always outcompete smaller clubs even in the transfer market going forward. So small clubs will never really be able to grow or match the level of larger clubs unless they just play out of their minds and perform a miracle, which hasn't solved the issue. Now, in my opinion, there should be a spend cap introduced by FIFA worldwide that imposes the same amount of spending budget on all the teams in one league, and that's the same across the whole world and the top divisions of the whole world. Now, you can impose that by division going down. So, for example, the Chinese Super League top division, Premier League, and Serie A will have the same budget cap for all the teams in those leagues to have the same opportunity to be successful, have the same level of money they can spend. So there will be no issue of a Man City having more money available than a Crystal Palace, and everyone will be on a level playing field. And when that happens and everyone's on a level playing field, like it was back in the day when there was no money and clubs were just jumping up and down the table, what that's going to do is that's going to increase competition across the league. It's going to make the sport and the league more entertaining to watch. It's going to remove the advantage leagues such as the Premier League have compared to the Spanish league because they have more money available through TV deals, etc. It's going to bring everyone on a level playing field and increase competition all across the board because it will bring all the teams at the same level all across the board. Now, if a team doesn't want to spend that budget, they want to spend less, then fair enough, they spend less. But the money's there to be spent if they want to spend it, and the opportunity is there for all those clubs to be at the top. And what this going to do is it's still going to attract owners, foreign owners, rich owners to still come and buy and invest in clubs without having the issue which financial fair play introduced, where it kind of drove them away from coming in and buying those clubs and doing what Chelsea or Man City did. And it's going to be a kind of invitation for investment into all those clubs. And not just one league, it'll be across all the leagues. Again, that's going to bring competition up across all the leagues and makes football worldwide generally a more entertaining sport and more level and balanced sport to watch. Now, my second rule or regulation I would like to see introduced is the use of video technology or video referees, and again, worldwide across the board. Now, this was trialed in a friendly against France and Spain, and in that one game, it kind of summarized the effect it can have on matches and deciding the outcome of matches. Where in that match specifically, a goal that was firstly allowed to stand was then corrected and disallowed, and further down the line, a goal which was allowed to stand in the first place was then disallowed after both decisions were reviewed on video. And it doesn't even take that long, so it doesn't stop the flow of play. Max the decisions took were 5 to 10 seconds. Now in some cases it was longer, but it's early days, and as referees get trained, that time I'm sure it's going to reduce down. So there's really no issue or any arguments against it. It just leads to fairer matches, it leads to fairer games, and for players themselves who are on the pitch playing. Currently, at every decision, they kind of hound the referee and say, like, because they truly believe that the decision's wrong, right? Now, some may not, and they do it anyway to kind of influence the referee. But my point is, in that instant, when video refereeing is introduced, no one's going to argue with the referee over every single decision because inside they'll know that, okay, most likely the decision that's been taken is correct because it's been reviewed by video. And whereas right now, in their mind, most likely the decision that's been taken is wrong. And that can play on their mind throughout the rest of the game and still affect the performance. Now, the professionals, they're highly paid. It shouldn't affect them, but it does in some cases. You can still see players constantly getting at the referee at every chance they get about something that's happened 20 or 30 minutes ago. And that's just going to start to remove that out of the game and lead to fairer, more competitive games and start to change some of the results that are highly influenced by referees we see. Another thing it might address is try and root out corruption in the game. Now, how much it's going to affect this, I'm not sure, but it might be able to start rooting out because every decision a referee makes will then also be reviewed on video at the same time, and every decision they make, whether it's a red card, whether it's a corner, will be under scrutiny. And that's just going to start to expose corrupt referees in some leagues across the world. Now, I'm not going to name any names, but in some leagues across the world, and may improve the fairness and competitiveness again of the sport worldwide. A big issue that currently exists is youth development, where players are largely bought from abroad or from other teams with rich mega money offers rather than being developed by clubs themselves. This is highlighted with teams like Chelsea, who have fantastic youth teams and a lot of good youth players. But how many of them really get a chance in the first team? Almost none. And they largely buy players from across the world with large money offers. So, in my opinion, a rule should be introduced. Now, this is a rough guide, of course, but something along the lines of in a squad of 30 that's allowed, 10 to 15 players should be homegrown and should be coming through the ranks of the youth teams of the club itself and should come up through the club at a certain level, a certain point, under 15s, under 16s, whatever. And what that's going to do is it's going to start to cause clubs to focus on their academies and improve their player development. And you're going to start to see more and more players that have been consistent throughout that club come up the ranks and perform well. And what it's going to start to do again is going to start to root out money and the amount of money spent across the board by clubs, because they will not have a choice to be able to spend that money because they would have a certain requirement. Now, you can still spend a set amount of that money on foreign players, on the other 10 or 20 or 15 players in your squad, and go and still buy foreign players or players that you want to spend a whole load of money on to strike that balance in your team, in your club. And what I should also feel should be introduced is a rule where on the pitch at any given time, two or three or maybe three or four players have to be those homegrown players that have come through the ranks at the club. Because otherwise, what you start to see is, yeah, they'll develop players, they'll give them a slot in the first team in the official team sheets. They won't really ever get a chance to play still. So to kind of actually ensure they get game time and they ensure they get time to play on the field and they get chances in the first team, a rule like that for on pitch time and the minimum level for players on pitch should also be introduced. And that's something that can be applied to kind of the nationality of players as well. Whereas homegrown players, for example, in England in the Premier League, there's a large influx of foreign players, and homegrown English players are kind of overpriced. And sometimes they aren't even gone for these days by clubs, and they just prefer to get players from abroad who are cheaper and they see them as better value. It will still allow them to do that, but at the same time introduce a law or rule where on the pitch or in its squad again, set maybe two, three, or four players have to be English in the Premier League, have to be English. This will improve player development. Both of these rules together will improve player development across the board at the levels of all levels across the board, at top level clubs, at medium level clubs, at lower league clubs, just completely across the board. It improve the support of fans. This can be argued, but I believe it will, because as a fan, when you're supporting the team and you see a whole bunch of players, where five or six players you've seen come up through the under 16s, under 18s, under 20s, and are now playing in the first team, and you're getting behind that player, compared to a player that you've just bought for maybe 30, 40 million, you're going to have more support and you're going to have more passion for the player and the team in general, where you see a team full of those players that have come through the club rather than a player you just spent maybe 100 million on and just bought. In my opinion, these three key points mentioned will start to address some of the issues that plague football as a sport in general. I mean, owners will be happier in general across the board because they don't have to spend as much money and they have to spend less to achieve the same or greater level of success. Clubs will benefit in general, and if you focus on the business model, as clubs will start to run at a profit and start to increase and start to reduce the debt they collect over the years, and the debt is going to start to reduce and profits going to start to increase. That's still going to allow clubs to be viewed as the ideal investment opportunity, where it's also acting as a profitable business as well as achieving results on the pitch. Although something such as a spend cap may be an unpopular choice, among players or for players, as they will get paid less because clubs have limited resources, limited funds. So generally, players' salaries and what they get paid will start to reduce down to accommodate them into teams. So it may be an unpopular choice within the players, but for everyone else, it's all positive, right? But it will also cause players to choose clubs and to play for teams that they want to play for, and around players, among players they want to play alongside, rather than being money minded and going to clubs which offer them more money. And if this club offers them more money, just leave and join that club. It will improve player loyalty, and you'll be playing for the team and players around you and the club you're playing for rather than the money you're getting paid. And it's not going to reduce by a whole lot. You're still going to get a whole load of money and still going to be paid the same kind of financial level that they are now. If something like a max ticket price or ticket price cap is introduced across the board, it'll improve fan support and general fan atmosphere in stadiums across the board, or may even allow fans that currently can't go be able to then afford to go and visit matches regularly. The improved competitiveness and fairness across the board in all the leagues and every match in general may also attract people that aren't interested in football right now to take an interest in the sport, where the ticket prices are affordable so they can go and see matches and see what the sport and what football is about, as well as see that okay, it's fair, it's fairly done, it's competitive, it's entertaining, the matches are more entertaining. It'll just improve the sport in general in almost every way, from player development to investment to the business aspect to performances to matches. So everyone in general across the board will be happier with these decisions and the introduction of these rules or regulations, except for the players who have only really developed this mentality because of the money being around. Before that, if there was no money, there was no choice, there was no mentality for players to be money minded. And this has only really come around recently, so it's not really that difficult to reverse and for youth level players to start to understand to play for clubs and players alongside rather than trying to pick clubs that get them the most money. That's it for this video, guys. Drop a like if you like my content, subscribe if you want to see more content that's based on Formula One and football. Now leave a comment down below telling me if you agreed with my points and my opinions, and if you disagree, also drop a comment down below. And also let me know if you have other points that you think would benefit the sport and should be introduced in general that haven't, and something I haven't mentioned. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.